Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Hermione Wants Harry to be her roommate. So do 4 blue hearts. Comment, be sure to subscribe. Be to our channel and like this video and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Harry x Hermione uncensored spicy version, link in description. The battle was over. The survivors were being tended to those that were alive or mourning the dead. At the center of all the mayhem was the one who won, Harry Potter. Harry looked disheveled and almost Saint catatonic and was holding an equally exhausted and injured Luna Lovegood, who was holding her right arm broken due to a stray curse. Leaning on his back was Hermione Granger, with Ron Weasley's head on her lap unconscious but breathing. Absent-mindedly brushing his hair with her hand both mixed with blood and dirt. All three were staring out into space taking comfort in their close proximity, calm. Ing to terms with what they had experienced. They were at the center of an ever-widening circle of carnage. The Dark Lord himself now a desiccated corpse a few feet away with a final look of astonishment. The last look he would ever have. Around him in a haphazard arch were his vaulted inner circle, all dead and in various forms of dismemberment, showing their final last minute of existence, almos. All with the same astonished look of their former master. Around them in an ever-widening circle were the casualties from both sides. Dead and dying, scarred, mutilated, and scarred for life. Lupin, Tonks, Moody, even Snape, all dead, was all that ran through the head of a very guilt-ridden and exhausted Harry Potter. As he surveyed the carnage, he sighed to himself, "It's my fault, my responsibility." Then, he felt Luna moving in his arms looking with her deep blue-gray eyes. "No, it's not you, nor anyone else's fault but Voldemort. Remember that Harry James." Luna, the mystic one of his friends, with her gray eyes, was piercing his thoughts and mind. Knowing she always said the truth especially to him. She seemed to always know what he was thinking as if she could read his mind. Maybe she can, he thought. She's right Harry. Tom Riddle is the one person who's at fault here, not you. Harry closed his eyes taking into his mind what both girls said as Hermione continued. Quote, "When he killed Moaning Myrtle 50 years ago, to this final battle he was the one solely responsible not only for those who died, but for your life and your pain. Please take what we said to heart ha. RRY as you know how rarely Luna and I agree on something." Hermione said behind him using her other hand to rub his back, while he felt Luna nodding as she snuggled into his shoulder. Harry sighed. "Oh, all right you two I'll try not go all depressive and angst-ridden on you." Hermione patted his back as Luna swung her good arm around his, trapping both his hands between them. But he didn't care at his friends around him and he finally relaxed. He still wondered about Ginny, but he saw down the rising ground they were on that Neville was with her, and from what he saw, she was in good hands. As they settled down for a well-earned rest several Aurors came up to them and within a few hours they settled themselves in conjured beds in what was left of the Great Hall of Hogwarts. Those critically injured had been sent to St. Mungo's, while the rest were housed at the Great Hall, now a temporary clinic with Madame Pomfrey heading the staff sent there. The lesser injured as were the Shell Show, CKED and their surviving relatives took up most of the space there. Later that night, an invisible shadow stole through the battlegrounds towards the Forbidden Forest. The person thinking no one could see him in his father's invisibility cloak was on a mission, to scatter the Deathly Hallows, and for him to get away from all that had happened. A single girl high in the Ravenclaw Tower saw him. How no one knew but herself. Yet she took this all in and then made her way down to follow at a distance. She had a few things to give to him and to her other best friend. Luna Lovegood keeping a tight hold of her healing arm now in a tight sling followed a path only she could see. The path of her friend and someone she cared more for each day. As she skipped along as though she didn't have a care in the world. She stopped suddenly looking around her attentively. She then walked steadily to the trunk of a rather large tree and yanked off the invisibility cloak Harry Potter was wearing. "There you are. I have been looking for you." Harry Potter was at the same time, angry, befuddled, and confused. How the hell did she do that? "Well Harry, I have been able to know where you are because I gave you something a year ago that kept me apprised of your movements." Luna answered in her normally flighty tone. "Oh, and it helps me know what you're thinking too." She smiled and giggled. "Harry thou GHT for a while as Luna stood there silently allowing him to come to a realization, the butterbeer cap. That's how. Very perceptive my dear Potter. Yes, and it has many uses too, as Luna continued. Harry thought back to the incident that had him acquired the said cap. Flashback. As they made their way to Professor Slughorn's party, Harry was nervous and fidgeting, while Luna was taking in her surroundings with an airy look. Then she took Harry's hand, and right before they made it to the entrance, she pulled him aside and then looked up at him with a wispy smile. Harry, I have something for you. Oh Luna, it's okay, you didn't have to get me anything. But he stopped as she smiled and shook her head slowly. No, Harry, it isn't for this festivity. She then pulled a small envelope with Sommet hing within it, seemingly poking out from under its surface. She took it and put it into Harry's hands. This is to be opened when you defeat Voldemort. Harry was speechless. He looked at his friend perplexed, then asked, "Wah, how do you know all when Luna?" She smiled and then unexpectedly hugged the still surprised boy, who reacted stiffly at first then relaxed. She looked up at him still smiling and said, "Oh Harry, I know you'll win. Just promise me you'll read the letter in this, and let me know if you'll accept what it says." She then moved away from the still surprised boy, and took his AR. Then gave him her normally airy look, waiting for him to react. After a few moments he slipped the envelope into a hidden pocket in his dress robes, nodded and smiled at his blonde-haired friend. "Okay Luna, I promise." They then made their way back to the entrance to the party. End flashback. So you read my letter, yet you're here and not back with us. Luna was now sitting on her feet eye level with a now humble Harry. So, you just threw away? Luna stopped at Harry's halting hand. He then took out from one of his cloak's pockets that same letter. A little crumpled and with a few easily viewed wet spots. I read it at least a dozen times while Ron, Hermione and I were on our mission, and I remembered your offer, but I forgot it during this battle, so can you forgive me? I had wanted to talk to you about this, and now with your revelations about the butterbeer cap. Well, I know you can at least help me with this now. Luna took that in and simply asked, "Aren't you angry with me, keeping an eye on you even from here? Weren't you disappointed with me when I was taken?" "No Luna." He then moved and took hold of her shoulders and squeezed them, carefully as to not injure her arm anymore. "I also knew where you and everyone else were, though your way was a bit specific." He smiled a tired smile at her now brightened face. She nodded and then explained to a now attentive Harry that the butterbeer cap had a locating and mood reading charm, as well as port key built in. "A port key, to where? Your house was a shambles after the Death Eaters went through it." Harry looked at her confused. "Well, Harry, is the Weasleys, we have a large plot of land at Ottery Street, Catchpole, and we have a summer cottage at the far end of our property. The port key would take you there to recuperate and plan out what you want to do next." Ever the Ravenclaw, Harry just smiled again at his friend, and seemingly more as he thought. She smiled back and nodded, then pulled out her wand. "I'll have Wink. Why, get your things, and I have contracted her to help us this summer." Harry looked a bit off, then understood. He nodded, then she added, "I'll have to follow you in a bit, got to give Hermione her cap too." "Wait, why does Hermione need a cap?" Luna looked a bit solemn, and then she looked intently into his eyes. Luna sighed. "Remember the time when Ronald left you too? He spent that time at his brother's home." "Yeah, I remember quite well. Hermione was crying a lot and I felt like we were all alone." Harry recalled all of it and a sense of dread slowly sunk into him. "Well, as you know, several of our classmates and their families were lost in the attacks, and so a few were also staying there at Bill Weasley's home." Harry nodded for her to continue. "Well, Ronald got closer to someone there, that's all I can say for now, Harry. Just please be there for her as I will. Can you do that for Hermione, and for me?" Luna took his hands, both of them still dirty, and squeezed while she continued to look deeply into his eyes. He reluctantly nodded, already figuring out what Ron might have done under the influence of the locket and his seemingly unstopped jealousy. Oh gods, what could he have done that could affect Hermione? Oh no. "Luna, are you saying that?" A horrible thought came into his mind. With Ronald's mindset as it was when he left, he could have. "Harry, please just be there for her, as he best friend." Luna was now crying, clutching his hands, a rare sight, and Harry did was he could, taking her into his arms and rubbing her back as she did the same for him. After a few moments he reluctantly broke their embrace and got up, pulling him up as well. She didn't want to tell him how she felt yet, that was for a later time. For now she indicated with her hand to give her the butte. Our beer cap, and with a swirl of wand moment it glowed for a fraction of a second. She handed it to him, they both nodded, then right before she tapped the cap she stood up on her toes and kissed him full on the lips. A rather bewildered Harry Potter disappeared when Luna shoved the cap into his hand and tapped it. After a few moments to collect herself mentally, Luna brushed off the dirt from her hands and legs and headed for the Great Hall with her second delivery that night. Later, she met up with Hermione, who was sitting next to Ronald's bed. His parents were at the foot of the bed looking worried. Did he tell her, or have you? A startled pair of Weasley parents looked at the odd Ravenclaw. Luna dear, don't do that, we nearly had our souls flow out when you startled us, said a jittery Molly Weasley. But Luna's intense look cleared away anything else they could have said. Both Weasley elders looked sad and a bit guilty, and then Molly spoke. He's still unconscious and we haven't has the chance to tell her. Luna sadly nodded, then made her way to Hermione. She bent down to her friend and asked, "Can I have a quick word with you, Hermione?" She was startled a bit, much like the Weasleys, yet knew that Luna needed to talk to her. She nodded and said, "Yeah, I could use the loo. Plus I need a quick break anyway." As the girls left, the Weasleys looked intently at Luna. She merely shook her head as she took Hermione's hand and headed to the nearest girls' bathroom. After both had done their business, Luna gave Hermione the butterbeer cap with the stipulation that first, Harry would already be at the location, the cap's port key destination. Next, Hermione should only activate it outside the Hogwarts and the Burrows wards. Then Hermione should be with Harry by tomorrow to help Luna with his various issues. To say Hermione was not pleased was an understatement. Who was this girl taking Harry away and then telling her she would be needed soon? Luna, why have you taken Harry away? Why, who do you think? And why would Harry talk to you and not me? And she went on for about 5 minutes as Luna listened to the tirade with her patented dreamy look. As Hermione wound up her speech, "Besides, the Weasleys and I are his only family. First, I found Harry in the Forbidden Forest just a half an hour ago, and not here. He was miserable and blaming himself for everything. I need you to help me clear his mind of these ludicrous thoughts, and I feel the both of us are the best people to do this. Or are you going to let the babbling Borkings get you to start another rant?" A speechless Hermione processed what Luna said, and after a few moments she got to about a few inches of the smaller girl's face and said, "I'll believe you, Luna, just because you have never lied to me or Harry. Yes, even with those outlandish stories of mystical animals we can't see. But I will be using the port key by tomorrow so we three can talk, fair enough?" Luna nodded, then handed Hermione the butterbeer cap turned port key and then hugged her. She then turned and left the girls' loo out to the entrance to Hogwarts, and as Hermione saw Luna skip down to the school gates before she turned, waved at her, and she disappeared. Shaking her head, she said to herself, "That girl will drive me to drink," Hermione thought as she made her way back to the castle, the Weasleys and Ronald. What she didn't know was how her world, already a mess with obliviated parents in Australia, to having no real home, will be turned on its ear again when she got to the Burrow. Over the next few weeks, many funerals and celebrations brought much of the cataclysmic events to a relatively quiet close. But events within the coming weeks would have long-lasting effects not only on those affected but in the wizarding world. If anyone would have looked at it passing by, the home seemed stuck between the 19th and 20th centuries. The outside looked much like a small home in the country wood. Wooden boards king up its walls with wood-framed windows and a thatched roof. Smoke coming out of a stone chimney, yet what seemed like electric light coming from inside. Yet it was not that at all. The bungalow was small, only about 800 square feet, with 2 bedrooms in back, and a single bathroom between the two. It had a living room encompassing the center of the house, with a small kitchen to the left, and a window on all of the remaining outside walls. Opposite the kitchen was one window where you could see a large pond with a small pier which went out about 20 feet. But if anyone who could see the magic that surrounded the home, they would see the layer upon layer of magic set down by all its previous tenants. Almost 300 years, and it so happens its current owner just happened to pop in. Luna quietly apparated to her cottage's front walks, and heard noise coming from the open window of the small kitchen. The odd girl entered quietly, slipped off her flats next to another pair of clearly male shoes. and walked barefoot through the living room to the kitchen where she found Harry making a small meal for them both. It seemed that things were well in hand, but Luna was Luna. "Harry, did you find everything you need? Or did the Nerfhotters take anything from you?" asked Luna with an appraising eye. He smiled at her odd question. "No, nothing bothered me, Luna, and I have our meal almost ready." She nodded but saw through his eyes how truly tired he was. Luna quietly assisted him as he finished up his tasks, and informed him that another might be joining them sooner than expected. "Hermione?" asked Harry. Luna looked at him, sighed and nodded. Harry took the apron he was using off and with Luna's help set the table for three, and then put a warming charm on the finished dishes. He then took her hand and both walked to the living room where he sat with her on one of two old handmade couches which faced each other with a fireplace between them on the far wall. As they sat, Harry ran his hand through his mop of hair trying to discern what he could ask his odd friend about the situation between Ron and Hermione. Luna for her part calmly sat and dreamily looked at Harry's face as he showed plainly the emotions he was cycling through. She smiled when he finally looked at her. "Luna, can you at least give me a hint about what Ron has done so I can be a bit more prepared so when Hermione shows up, I can help her through this?" Luna nodded and said, "Ronald did something that so disturbed the Bellywops that it has changed his relationship with Hermione, you and all of us." That alone was a clear revelation to Harry. Ron had done it again, but this time there was no saving him from himself. Harry sighed. She then took his hand and squeezed it. "She will need you, Harry, to be her friend, her sounding board, her shoulder to cry on, and I will be here to help you both. Is that all right with you?" He closed his eyes and nodded. Even with her rather unique behavior, Harry knew Luna cared about him and her friends. Well, he got an answer, sort of. But at least he had something that distracted him from his own issues. And helping Hermione was a good way to avoid them. Little did he know that Luna was already planning to enlist Hermione to help her with Harry's problems and vice versa. For all her odd thinking, she was still a Ravenclaw for Merlin's sake. And with the food ready, they sat and waited. Luna knowing Hermione would be signaling her with her butter beer cap soon, and Harry with worry building about his friend's future as well as his own. Hogwarts Great Hall. Hermione was noticing it. The concerned looks and the quiet conversations which seemed to be about her. The Weasleys were keeping something from her, and even with her questioning them they simply said that it was nothing and hinted that it would all become clear once Ron woke up. "What is so bad that they have to keep mum about it?" Hermione said to herself as she sat waiting for the youngest male Weasley to awaken. Luckily for her, a few minutes later he did just that. But then Madame Pomfrey shooed them all away and took Ron to be examined. As they all waited, Hermione evaluated the family. Ginny was sleeping on Neville's shoulder. Now that relationship was new to her, at least since they returned. Harry seemed to accept it, at least from what she saw. But who was she to judge her own relationship with? The patient being examined was not quite right, so with that thought filed for later she mentally moved on. Molly and Arthur were subdued, quite obviously with the death of their son Fred in the final battle, but something else also seemed to preoccupy them. When she met their eyes, then seemed concerned, even a little sad. Then they smiled, nodding their heads to say to her that it was all right. Hermione did the same and continued her visual survey. Bill and Fleur were keeping an eye on a depressed George, and Hermione understood that clearly. Though once she caught Fleur looking sadly at her as though she knew what was going on. But otherwise Fleur focused solely on a distraught George. She also knew Charlie was with the Malfoys, sans Lucius who was in a ministry holding cell. The order had him in a safe house until Lucius's trial. He had given himself up so Draco and Narcissa could stay free. As she sat waiting, she noticed Molly looking at the school clock every few minutes and then back to where Ron was being examined at the back of the Great Hall behind conjured curtains. "Molly, why are you looking at the clock?" Hermione asked her, patience wearing thin. "Oh, dear, don't you worry about it. I am just thinking ahead so when Ron comes out, and with hopefully Madame Pomfrey allowing it, I can take him and you home, of course." She smiled at Hermione, though it didn't reach her eyes. He told her a completely different story. They showed her that the Weasley matriarch was apprehensive and sad. What the hell is going on? Hermione asked herself. Later, after Ron was cleared and released, the red-headed family and Hermione made their way down to the school's gate. She felt a strained atmosphere around her. It was as though the Weasleys didn't want her to go with them, then with a nod from Molly. Ron stopped and took Hermione aside. "Hermione dear, Ronald has something to tell you. We will see you when you arrive." Molly then paused a moment and took Hermione's hands. "And dear, please whatever happens, know we will always love you and our door is always open to you." With a quick squeeze she let her hands go, smiled as Mrs. Weasley and the rest of the family apparated away, leaving an angry and confused Hermione Granger, and a sullen and sad Ronald Weasley. Hermione knew this was it, whatever was going on had to do with Ron and Molly, by leaving them there at the Fr. Aunt of the gate of Hogwarts forced him to tell her. There in her classic arms akimbo pose, Hermione simply asked, "Well?" Seemingly shaking in place, rubbing his hands together then through his hair, Ron answered, Herms. You know not to call me that. Now what in Merlin's name is going on, Ronald Billis?" Hermione's face was redder than even the faulted color of the Weasley clan. "All right, I'll tell you. But not with you. Or me yelling at each other, right?" Hermione sighed, nodded, and he took her hand, guiding her to a set of stone benches off to the side of the entrance. Ron blew a breath, trying to gather his thoughts while Hermione silently fumed, already thinking various scenarios as to what Ron had done. He looked up and started quickly talking, not even giving her a chance to interrupt. "Back during the Horcrux hunt, when I left I actually trailed you two till you guys apparated. When I couldn't track you anymore I went to the one place I knew I would be safe and I LD get a lead on where you two might have gone, my brother, Bill's place." Hermione nodded and tried to ask something, but Ronald plowed on. "Wait Hermione, I have to get this out, just save all that till I'm done, right?" With a huff she nodded and crossed her arms as he went on. "Well, as you know, Bill and Fleur housed those that were being hunted by the Snatchers, the DEs in our dutiful ministry," Ron said snidely. "But they were sending them to the continent where they could then be sent to the Americas or Australia." Hermione nodded as he continued. "Well, a few purebloods and half-bloods helped. Two of them were Susan and Hannah." Hermione moved her hand to tell Ron to continue. "I stayed there for about 5 weeks, and as I worked with them," Ron paused and looked at her eyes with guilt, "I became rather close to one of them." The guilt was already written on his face. Hermione swiftly raised her hand, stopping Ron. A shocked look on her face, Hermione took a shuddering breath. After a few moments, as Ron was waiting for her to calm down, she slowly nodded and now sadly continued. "Sue was having a hard time of it, leading her life as a pureblood under the watchful eye of the ministry at school. And of course living at Bill's while sneaking off to help us and the refugees. I helped her as much as I could, do what I could to help her, and slowly we became close." Ron was more fidgety and blushed more. Hermione Granger was finding breathing difficult, already guessing where this was leading. But being a Gryffindor, she soldiered on and asked simply, "How close, Ronald?" Ron stood up holding Hermione's hand. He squeezed it then let go. After a few more tense moments of silence he finally spoke, "She's at the Barrow, Hermione, been there since we came back from the hunt. When my brother had to move as she had no family and..." Ronald, how close? Answer me please. Quietly crying, Hermione was slowly crumbling from within, her soul shattering as each second passed. She was smart enough to know what was coming next. Ronald, seeing what his words were doing to his best friend, mumbled, with his words not making any real sense, till a bang from Hermione's wand held above her startled him. "Sue's having my baby." He then looked in horror as he realized what he finally blurted out. Silence reigned as Ron looked at his former love. Hermione had a perplexed look on her face. Got up and stood still in front of Ron for a full 10 seconds. Then, like a marionette cut by its strings, she collapsed with a great wail, sobbing and crying hysterically. Repeatedly, saying, "No," over and over again. Ronald stood like a statue, not really knowing what to do, until a soft pop was heard above Hermione's now quieter sobbing, and standing a few feet from him was one Luna Lovegood. As she walked towards the mess that was Hermione Granger, Luna commented out loud. "Well, Ronald, I see you told Hermione the truth about you and Susan. Though I think you should have taken a little more care and understanding on how to talk to a girl." Luna took in the disturbing scene before her. Ron standing there like a doofus, while Hermione was on the ground clearly having a breakdown. He silently walked over and without any warning slugged Ron in the nose, breaking it and leaving him now a heap on the ground, holding his hand to his face trying to stem the blood now flowing down his shirt and robes, further dirtying them. A swift kick in the gut left Ronald Bilious Weasley in a fetal position, gasping for air, in heavy pain with blood still dripping from his nose. Satisfied with what she had done and knowing it would have been a very Muggle response that Ron wouldn't have thought of any witch or pureblood to do, Luna turned towards her fallen friend. Luna gave Ron a piercing gaze as she helped Hermione up. Ronald, if you had done your best 5 months ago, if you had actually cared for Hermione, you would not be in the situation you're now in. The Ravenclaw student then frowned at his shocked look. I do hope that with Susan you will think before doing and saying anything to her, Ronald. Luna seemed to think a bit, then said, I do hope you realize how you've not only hurt Hermione, but Harry, and me as well. She looked intently at Ron as a few tears started to bubble at the side of her eyes. I cared for you for quite a long time, Ronald, even back to when we were very young. But I set that aside as first my mother died, and my father threw himself into the Quibbler, and left me to my own designs. She took a quick breath as a now silently crying Hermione was also listening. Hugging onto the younger girl. I also stepped back, as Harry did when we realized you had feelings for Hermione. Yet you seemed not to really want her as a girlfriend, she was more to you like, what do the Muggles call it? Oh yes, friends with benefits. Now Ron was stuttering, still holding his bloody nose, as Hermione became more sullen as Luna continued. Luckily you two didn't get too far for you to hopefully stay friends. But that is for a later time. She turned to a now sadly depressed Hermione. Let's go to Harry and talk. I'm sure the Nargles will stay away now that I spread garlic around the house. She smiled, and with one hand on Hermione, one on her trunk, she apparated, leaving a confused, angry, and sad Ronald Weasley. About 5 minutes later he apparated to the burrow. To face his future while always wondering, what if I had not been such a bloody git? Back at the Lovegood bungalow. It had been a tense time for Harry to wait as Luna got the signal she was waiting for. Indeed, it was still the same night that he and she had made it to this cottage, and with a smile and a wave Luna was gone to collect his best friend. As he waited he remembered all that he had shared with Ron and then with Hermione. There was no question that deep down Ron was a good bloke and would be a great friend to many. But with the war and the missions they had to take to win the war on showed his flaws had in fact hampered more than helped Harry in his quest to rid the world of Voldemort and his followers. Then he thought of Hermione. What he could say, a loyal friend, yet a pain in the ass when she saw him slacking. A deeply caring person whose single-minded focus can help and hurt as well. But deep down he knew she was his best friend, even with the horrendous 6th year they both had, and the Horcrux hunt. She stood by him when everyone else abandoned him. He remembered Ron's departure. He made it a point to talk to him in the future about that and what was apparently happening now. Then came Luna. A girl who he had heard about since she entered Hogwarts in his 2nd year, but really not gotten to know till he had that 5th year in dealing with Umbridge, the Inquisitorial Squad. And still he discovered the unique beauty of Thestrals and a dirty blonde-haired Ravenclaw that seemed just as close to him as his other best friend was. He also remembered how both have suffered at Malfoy Manor. He realized he had 2 friends to take care of, and although he was a victim as well, he decided to put all his efforts to help them from now on, whether they liked it or not. His musings were interrupted by a pop and a sobbing blur of brown hair landing on him as a crying Hermione Granger was encircled by her best friend while his other friend took her trunk up to her room to get the 2nd bed in her room ready. By the time she came back Harry had calmed Hermione down and was leading her to the dining room table. They spent the evening talking of the upcoming week, the funerals to attend, and agreeing to talk the next day about Ron and Susan. After a few hours of talking about recovering Hermione's parents, and having Hermione agree to have Harry and Luna go with her, an owl came in through an open window in the living room. It landed in front of Luna. All looked apprehensive. After retrieving the letter, feeding it a treat, the owl left. Luna read the letter. Harry and Hermione saw the changes in Luna's face. Gone was the always flighty look, now a crestfallen and sad face was seen clearly. After a few moments the letter fell out of Luna's now shaking hands, as she shook, looking out into space, crying without a sound. Hermione got up and wrapped Luna in her arms as Harry read the letter out loud to her. To Luna Lovegood. From St. Mungo's Magical Hospital, Critical Care Ward. Miss Lovegood, you are needed urgently at St. Mungo's as your father Xenophilus is in critical care, and has asked for you. Come at your earliest opportunity. Healer Tabitha Stevens, Senior Vascular Healer. St. Mungo's Magical Hospital, London. Harry exchanged a knowing look with Hermione and both nodded to each other. Then like a well-oiled machine, Harry got up. Hell. Pet Hermione locate and put Luna's flats on, then move the girls to the fireplace. He threw some flow power and yelled out, St. Mungo's, and sent Hermione and Luna with him quickly following. Bedside conversations. They arrived to a crowded and busy entrance as the war's casualties were either being brought in or leaving with family while more family waited for those still being seen. Harry took Ch. Arjun took the girls to the reception area and asked for the location of the critical care ward. Once they got the directions he quickly ferried them through the crowded hallways towards the critical care section of the hospital. The task was made harder by those gawking at three heroes of the just-finished war, but they eventually made it to the ward. It took a few more minutes and 2 flights of St. Airs for them to arrive at the entrance to the ward. Once again Harry took charge and reluctantly using his fame to get them into quickly seeing Luna's father. When they arrived at the room's entrance, they came upon the editor and publisher of the Quibbler, Xenophilus Lovegood. Harry recognized the sandy-haired older man. The very same one who put them in Death Eater hands all those months ago in a vain attempt to rescue Luna. Harry quenched an angry thought as he was here for Luna and not her father. Hermione also seemed to be having some conflicting emotions, but one look at Luna put a stop to those. Luna launched herself to her father's side as she physically moved the healer examining him. With great effort Zeno wrapped his weak arms around his only child. Poppet, I am glad you are in one piece. All Luna could do was cry and repeat, Daddy, many times as she cuddled herself to her father's side. Harry and Hermione moved to the wall facing the foot of the bed as the family reunion continued, the healer long gone. In a few minutes Zeno noticed who was in the room and tensed up, but before anything was said the healer returned and with her father's consent continued his examination. Luna joining Harry and Hermione outside as the examination continued. A short time later the healer called them back in and explained Zeno's situation to him and them. Mr. Lovegood, the curses you took when you were held captive by the Death Eaters and in your stay in Azkaban have left their mark on your magical core. He paused as he gathered his thoughts. You have chronic magical depletion, sir. For all intents and purposes you will be only a few degrees above a squib in power. And that also means what magic you have left is all you have. The least it can do is making you a squib, the most, you could die, sir. Mr. Lovegood seemed to understand, and with that the healer left. Luna seemed to tighten her hold on him, as though that might keep him here. But Zeno was a realist, and maneuvered to sit up and motioned for Harry and Hermione to join them. After they settled into seats next to the bed Zeno spoke. First, I am truly sorry I gave you up to the Death Eaters back when you came to me for refuge. They had Luna, and I simply had no choice when it came to my child's safety. Harry and Hermione nodded, but Zeno continued. That still doesn't excuse me at almost losing the war by allowing you to be captured. I see that now and would have done differently as my poppet hasn't talked to me since. A shuddering breath was heard as Luna, still shaking, nodded and added. I'm still furious with you, Daddy. I would have sacrificed my life to make sure Harry got his chance at Voldemort, and you see that I would do it again if I had to. All Zeno did was nod and sigh. I know and I understand now. But I don't want you to be angry with me now, so I have contacted your cousin Brian to take over the restart of the Quibbler, and my brother Vern will also help. Before Luna could say anything Zeno added. Harry, as I owe you a life debt, I want to offer Luna as a personal advisor and assistant when she graduates from Hogwarts, or if she chooses, as she has I'm sure passed her owls, right away. Before Harry could answer Hermione said, Listen Harry, I think this is Zeno's way of not only paying back a life debt, but protecting Luna. As the Misters Trumbley will be running the Quibbler, Luna can help us and we can help her. As they said this, a young man, followed by an older man, came in, and after a short discussion, the both discussed their new jobs, thanks to Zeno, and the teens sat back as they talked. Even with the rough day Hermione had just had, she could still look at a situation and offer logical views to him. After a few moments he just smiled and nodded. In the next few minutes all the logistics were worked out and the Trumbleys left to do their work, leaving Harry, Hermione, Luna and Zeno alone in the hospital room. The former editor but still owner of the Quibbler looked at the three faces and sighed. He then focused on his only child. I know this is hard for you, Poppet, but I have to stay here and it might take months until I'm back on my feet, so, he turned to Harry. Please can you allow her to stay with you, Harry, until. Harry, Hermione and Luna smiled. No worries, Mr. Lovegood, we are staying at your summer cottage at least until we retrieve Hermione's parents from Australia. Zeno's eye lit up at not just from where they were all staying, but for where they were going. The land down under had so many odd creatures, muggle and magical, Zeno, even in his current state. Let them know to take pictures and search out any odd magical creatures they come across. With a verbal promise, Harry and Hermione left the two to talk privately. Luna came to Finn them about 20 minutes later with a quiet request to return to the cottage. They did, and after a bedtime snack all three went to bed knowing the following week would be trying. But they had each off. And that alone made its coming tolerable. The sun was yet to rise as a figure made its way toward a small lake, more of a pond next to the dwelling she had come from. As the slow light of the coming dawn was coming, the figure was feminine in form, finally stopped at the end of the makeshift pier that was due east of the cottage. She looked around, twirling her brownish blonde hair, and she sat down and dipped her bare foot into the clear and cool water. Last night they had somehow ended up together in the master bed Luna insisted Harry have, while the girls would be in Luna's room on bunk beds. Both girls heard the spine-tingling screams an hour later from a clearly disturbed Harry. Both knew that Harry must be either reliving the memories of the war, or nightmares of seeing those he cared of dying grisly and horrible deaths. Whichever reason, both girls were at his side in an instant. It took them a few more minutes to calm him down. Holding him and whispering to him they were there. Throughout the ordeal, Harry did not wake fully. When he calmed down, the beleaguered wizard had a firm hold on the girls' waists. With it being 3 in the morning, the witches had a quiet conversation without waking Harry. After a few minutes they agreed that with Harry's propensities for night terrors it was all right for them to stay at least the night. They both snuggled into their friend and all fell rapidly asleep. As she thought of what had transpired, Luna wrapped her arms around her other leg while she rested her chin on her knee, as she softly sung a rhyme or song lyric for the next few minutes. Until she heard and felt another person walking on the rickety pier coming closer to her at its end. She sighed quietly and knew her tranquil time alone was now over. Hermione, what brings you out here? Did the Raxperts bother you out of bed? Hermione Granger slowly sat down, quietly dipping both her feet into the water joining Luna's, and shivered slightly. No, Harry and I found you missing. So we searched the cottage before Harry saw you out here through the kitchen window. The Muggle-born witch adjusted herself on the pier, continued. I suggested he start making breakfast. While I came out to see how you were doing. The silver-eyed witch watched her brown-haired friend stoically, then answered, I'm fine, but I wanted to think about everything, so I came out here waiting for the dawn to arrive. Hermione nodded and added she did much the same back in her hometown. She described a park that was also set to the east of where she lived. So when she wanted to think TNGS through in the mornings, she described getting up early and did much the same thing, though the park's pond was too small for a pier, so she walked into the water, holding her shoes and socks in her hands, and awaited the morning's light. Of course I did this in summer rather than winter. Luna eyed her and smiled as it seemed she asked that very same question. Hermione shook her head and just smiled. Well, in winter I didn't quite do that, now would I? As both girls smiled and then sat back, now admiring the sky as blues and purples gave way to light browns, orange and then a fiery red as the sun was making its way up from the horizon. A green flash then occurred, rarely seen by non-magicals, but clear to both witches. Then, a slow turn to the blue in the sky until the bright yellow of the sun sparked the quiet around the lake to suddenly erupt with the daily natural noise that surrounds such a place. As the girls were enjoying the new sounds, a clear masculine voice called them to a hearty breakfast prepared by a very cute black-haired wizard that could cook well. They both silently thanked the gods that Harry was their friend, and could give most competent chefs a run for their money. They both waved and smiled at him as he awaited his girls' wait. Where did that come from? He thought. As the girls helped each other up and walked barefoot back to the cottage, they joined arms as close girlfriends do. As they made it to the back door of the cottage, there stood their friend Harry Potter, smiling and holding the door open to his two closest friends. 20 minutes later, after finishing a filling breakfast, the three adjourned to the curved living room adjacent to the kitchen. As they got comfortable in the single comfy chair and small sofa, they discussed the probable events of the coming week. Being a few funerals one a ministry-run affair, they were all expected to attend. Plus the smaller funerals like the Weasleys, Lupin and Tonks. They all three agreed that they'd attend those three. Then a sudden brown blur came in from the open window of the living room, and landed in the table in front of the three friends. After Hermione took the envelope from the delivery owl's leg, Luna offered it an owl treat and it flew off, leaving the three to open the parchment-style envelope with a very familiar seal. "Well, let's see what Gringotts wants of us," Harry stated. Hermione opened it and she read aloud its contents. "To Lord Potter Black, the Lady Granger and the Lady Lovegood. You all are hereby invited to the will reading of Severus Octavian Snape at 3 in the afternoon this coming Friday. Please do not discard this announcement as it is a port key to the conference room where the event will take place. If Gringotts can help you with your current accounts and future investments, do not hesitate to ask us in person, or owl us for any questions you might have. Thank you for your time and may you have profit and wealth in your future. Griphook, Assistant Accounts Clerk. Gringotts London Branch. Diagon Alley." The three mentally digested the idea of Snape wanting them, of all people, at his will reading. As they pondered this, several more owls made their way into the small cottage's living room. After a few more minutes of gathering the messages and feeding the departing owls, the three friends got the confirmation of the ministry memorial, as well as the two private funerals they knew they would attend. They sent thank you missives for the others they weren't attending. They all agreed that sending flowers and condolence letters would be done. RRY suggested a quick trip to Diagon Alley to get supplies for the week, morning attire for all three, as well as a quick walk to St. Mungo's to visit Luna's father to inform him of their plans, and give Luna more family time with him. The rest of the day was filled with preparations for the week and making appointments at Madame Malkin's for work, in dress robes, as the dress robes would be used for the funerals. They also sent an owl out to set up their travel plans as they wanted to leave the following Monday for Australia and Japan. They enjoyed a time of quiet contemplation as they fondly talked about those who died, starting the mourning process for themselves. One final owl came from Andromeda Tonks to meet with them Wednesday to talk about how Harry would integrate himself into little Teddy Tonks' life as his godfather. He replied that he and his best friends, Hermione and Luna, would be there, and sent that last owl out on its way. Then they finally began to talk about Ron and Susan. "Well, whether Ron meant or not, he will have to grow up now," Hermione said as she sadly looked at her two friends. "Susan will be good for him," and Harry put his arm around her as she silently cried. He wrapped his other arm around Hermione, as Luna was on her other side, hugged her from behind and squeezed to let her know she cared as well. The brightest witch of her age broke down, while inside the warmest cocoon of her friend's embrace, seeking the comfort they gave freely. Then she remembered her parents did the same when she was younger and needed their comfort after a rough day at school. In her mind this gave her more reason to find her parents and bring their memories back. Luna then spoke, breaking her line of thought. "You remembered what I told Ronald before I broke his nose, Hermione?" Luna asked as Hermione nodded, sniffling as Harry conjured a handkerchief for her to use. "Well, I have had a crush on him since I was 10 years old." This was a surprise to them. Though thinking a bit Luna's house being nearby the burrow, it made things clear to them. Luna sighed and sat back heavily on the sofa. "He came by with Ginny all the time as we grew up and we played many games with each other right up to my mother's death. Then he seemed to stop coming as Ginny did a few months later." Luna sighed and Hermione squeezed her hand back, smiling at her. "Then I saw my first year as Ginny and I were sitting together on the express." Then her face seemed to dim, the smile gone from her face. "Then one day I went up to him while we passed in the hall, and I tried to talk to him. He then started to call me loony and that there are bats in my belfry." Single tears tracked down her right cheek as Harry and Hermione sadly listened. "When I tried several more times he rebuffed me each and every time." Slowly Hermione returned the embrace Luna had given her. "And of course when in your 4th year he seemed to have feelings for you, I stopped myself from trying to become closer to him." Luna sadly smiled, silent tears now on both cheeks, as Hermione nodded. And then the git goes and sucks face with of all people Lavender .. The Snog Queen, Brown. Hermione added with a huff. I think that boy only had food, Quidditch, and then snogging as his lifelong goals. She laughed sadly, and now he has to grow up for Susan and their baby's sakes. She sighed and leaned her head to Harry's shoulder as she cried quietly, held on both sides by her close friends. Somehow during Luna's speech Harry found himself between both girls, now silently crying while he held them and squeezed them to convey his caring and support. They talked a bit more and agreed that they would stay as far away from Ron as possible but would be polite, with Hermione saying she'll have First hexing dibs if he says or does something else stupid. Luna quickly added she'd be next in line. All three laughed and felt much better. Woe it is to be Ron Weasley when he sees them again. Harry thought. That night it was first Hermione, then Luna who had a bad nightmare. At the end all three ended up in Luna's bed. They silently agreed to keep this bit to themselves and said nothing as the pattern of all three sleeping together in each other's beds became normal for the rest of the week. On Monday, they went to Madame Malkin's to order and get fitted for their robes. As they waited for the robes to be done, they visited a wizarding travel agency, where they reserved 3 international port keys to Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia for the following Monday. Harry and Luna were unfamiliar with the area, asked Hermione where the Gold Coast was. She answered, the Gold Coast is between Brisbane to the north and Sydney and Newcastle to the south on the eastern coast of the country. With confused looks, Hermione crossed her arms under her chest, added, I wanted my parents away from the major cities while able to make a decent living and accessible enough to be found later on. Ooh, both Luna and Harry replied. They both privately didn't understand where the exact place was, but trusted Hermione as restoring her parents' memories was the main reason to go there. With the portkeys purchased they went through the Leaky Cauldron and shopped in Muggle London until dinner time. When they returned to their cottage a surprise awaited them. They smelled freshly cooked food wafting out the windows and a small yet recognizable being awaiting them at the cottage's front entrance. Winky, what are you doing here? Harry asked, surprised as he thought Winky had stayed with the Hogwarts elves. Winky replied, I's here to do what Dobby asks me to do's. And what would that be, Winky? Luna asked as Hermione nodded. To serve ancient House of Potters and its master, and its missus, said the now proud-looking house elf. But, Winky, aren't you a Hogwarts elf, tied to the castle and the school? Asked a confused Hermione. I's don't likes it there. I's wants to serve a family and use needs an elf, said Winky, and that's when they saw the bludgeon in her midriff. Then they knew why she was there. Dobby, all three thought. Are you pregnant, Winky? Luna asked now as all 3 magicals were concerned about the diminutive being. As it turned out rightly, Winky was having Dobby's offspring and he had asked her to be Harry Potter's elf in case he couldn't. With his death a year before, Winky used her magic to delay her child's development. As the conversation continued they knew she would fulfill that request even though Hermione was opposed to it. It took almost half an hour. But with a grudging respect they negotiated an agreement with the pregnant house elf. Winky would be Harry's elf and would fulfill those duties associated with house elves, Hermione insisted, a fairness clause added. And Luna asked Winky to keep an eye out for Nargles. After a few more additions, Winky agreed, and they would pay for the new elf offspring's future. Winky did concede that Dobby would have wanted that. After a fantastic dinner provided by a very happy elf they retired for the night knowing they would have a busy yet somber week. And like clockwork, they all ended up in Hermione's bed by morning. 3C, much of this needs a beta reader so please let me know if you can help. The Ministry Memorial was Tuesday morning just outside of Hogwarts on a flat meadow between the school and the small magical village. After their morning rituals and breakfast prepared by Winky, the trio made their way by flow to the 3 broomsticks in Hogsmeade to arrive 15 minutes before the memorial was to begin. The ceremony was done right in front of an obelisk which was a huge wand for the top 2/3 while a score of witches and wizards had their hands on the large handle of the granite wand. Below that were 4 large shields with the names of those who died on both sides. It was obvious that the point of the memorial was that with the conflict over, all witches and wizards need to work together to have a chance at peace and prosperity, as at the top of the stone shields was chiseled the famous saying, "We stand together, or die separately." As the trio made their way to the ceremony, they passed many witches and wizards. Some were classmates who mostly thanked them by both shaking hands, and hugging them, or simply nodded and smiled. Due to this they were a few minutes late, and tried to sit in the back. But a ministry official spotted them and they were at the front within a few minutes, much to their annoyance. All three now craved anonymity, not being thrust into the spotlight. They convinced the officials they weren't going to speak, after a few clear statements of hexing. Certain bits off, they stayed and heard just about anyone who could talk from the ministry just to hear from two people. Minerva McGonagall, and interim minister of magic Kingsley Shacklebot. The headmistress talked of various times the senior students fought and died for not only the school and the rest of the student body, but for the British wizarding world. At the end she was standing tall and stoic, but yet all could see the silent tears as she finished and made her way down the ceremonial stage. Sitting right next to a crying Hermione Granger as Harry patted her back and held a weeping Luna Lovegood. Kingsley's speech was a bit longer but clear in what had caused the war and why we as British magicals must make those hard choices so that we can break the cycle of dark lords and ladies tying to gain power, and killing off more of the old lines as much as those they professed to say they were trying to keep alive. We must stop the prejudice and persecution of not only magical races that aren't human, but of the stupidity of bloodlines. The facts now set in stone is this. We have lost 50% the male wizards in the last 2 wars, so much so that if we don't do something soon, in 3 to 4 generations there will not be a British wizarding community. That seemed to get everyone's attention. The rest of his speech talked about the sacrifice of many for the few left to rebuild. He also hinted at coming legislation to do just that. Many older magicals shuddered and had made many of the younger attendees confused. The trio included. After the dedication of the monument, and a few talks with those they knew, Harry, Hermione and Luna walked back to the 3 broomsticks and flowed back to their cottage. They had a light lunch, and exhausted, all 3 took an afternoon nap. Harry nodded off within a few minutes. This let both girls have a chance to talk, and in that 20-minute talk they agreed to stay with Harry for the summer to help him deal with the stress and such as any war brings, as much for themselves with the same issues. They then both took their naps until Winky got them up for a very filling dinner. Wednesday brought their meeting with Andromeda Tonks. She looked like her deceased sister Bellatrix, which still threw Harry and Hermione a bit. But while Bella was a crazed murderess and took glee in torture and mayhem, Andromeda was totally opposite, by defying her family in marrying Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born wizard. Though now a caring and loving person, she saw her family die. Her husband Ted to snatchers, during that last year of the war. Her daughter Nymphadora and son-in-law, Remus Lupin, died in those final months as well. All she had was Teddy, her grandson. The trio apparated to the street in front of Harry's godfather's home. Andromeda was staying at number 12 Grimmauld Place as her house was in ruins and wouldn't be rebuilt for a few more months. As Creature answered the door, they saw some changes already. First thing was Creature. He was polite, clean, and not grumbling about half-bloods or mudbloods. It seemed that a female Black matriarch needed to stay at the old place for not only the gloominess go away but to reset Creature, for the lack of a better word, to attune to his new mistress. Finally they noticed the lack of the previous Black matriarch's portrait. Walburga Black is gone, Andromeda said as the 3 saw her coming out of a well-lit room that was the oppressive sitting room they remembered. After they re-given tea by a solemn and kind Creature, they discussed how Harry would be involved with Teddy now and in the future. They informed her of their upcoming trip and she was supportive, but she also received promises of visits. With Harry being the current Lord Black, they started the process for her and Teddy to be readmitted into the Black family. Finally they agreed to joint ownership of Grimmauld Place. The Black family owned the whole block, until Ted's majority when he would get the deed. As they started to leave, an owl with the Hogwarts emblem on a leather covering landed with 3 parchment letters. All 3 looked at one another, knowing what they would be. Andromeda, witnessing the event, asked, "Well, are you going back?" All 3 looked at each other apprehensively. As the sun rose on a new day, Harry was sitting on the small pier jutting out onto the small pond that sat beside the cottage he shared with 2 wonderful witches, at least in his opinion. They were to attend Snape's will reading later on in the day, but now, the boy who won, was thinking of what he would do next. They had agreed the coming Monday go to Australia to search and restore Hermione's parents' memories, as well as a side trip to, of all places, Japan. Harry wondered what else would he, and the girls do for the rest of the summer. It seemed Zeno wanted Luna to visit his old sensei in a place in Japan called Okayama. So they would swing over after they had Hermione's parents squared away. They also agreed to return for their last year at Hogwarts. The ministry and the headmistress had already approved for those who couldn't attend due to the war to have the option to return. Harry, Hermione and Luna, who hadn't missed any time due to her attending the last year, would all be in the same year's class. They hadn't had time to sit down and figure out what classes they wanted to take for the coming year. They agreed to figure it out after their return. As he was thinking deeply on the end of the pier, the girls were up and making their breakfast. They had agreed to switch off with Harry making breakfast on even days, while the girls cooked on odd days. They all shared Sundays as they liked sharing that particular day. They used that day to simply unwind. So, with a shout of his name, Harry was pulled away from his musings and waved to the girls as he made his way towards the lit cottage that they had made into a home, albeit a summer home for now. Oh. After the rather sumptuous breakfast the girls made, they all showered, dressed, and were ready for the final day of the week in Snapesville reading. All three had varying thoughts on it. Hermione was curious as to why her former potions professor would invite her, as she knew she wasn't one of his favorites. Then she remembered that Harry was invited and assumed that if Harry was invited, she would be as well. Now she wondered if the grouchy professor would invite Ron as well. Luna was simply amazed she would be as she was a known friend of Harry as well. But, she was never a point of contention by Snape, as were Harry, Hermione, and their fellow Gryffindors, as far as she knew, but she just nodded and looked outside for the gagremlings who frequently entered quaint little homes like theirs and consumed dirty dishes. So, with that in mind, she promptly got up and washed them before they left. Harry was the most perplexed of the three, as he knew, well, at least he thought he knew, his place in the former headmaster's mind of who wouldn't be invited to Professor Snape's will reading. He'd be heading that list. So, he mused at why he was invited as he finished his chores around the cottage. After he got cleaned up, dressed and took a quick look at the wall clock, Harry called out within the cottage for Hermione and Luna, as it was coming up to the time to leave for the will reading at Gringotts. With a flurry of sound from two distinct sets of feet, he smiled as both girls ended up at the foot of the staircase, grabbing each other to avoid falling on their backsides. While Harry was sensibly dressed with a white button-up dress shirt, black tie with the Potter family crest, black dragon hide pants and black dragon hide boots, with a black robe with his Potter and black family coat of arms on his upper left side, Hermione dressed in a white blouse, blue skirt and matching blue robe with the Granger crest. Luna was similarly dressed with the Lovegood crest on her robes. All three giggled as they apparated together and held hands while Harry concentrated on the port key he had, and they ended up in Gringotts. They all popped out of the little cottage, and landed wobbly but upright, with both girls holding a swaying Harry between them. After a shared smile they walked through the lobby the bank and their most curious meeting. None realized they were unconsciously still holding hands. As the trio entered the large conference room which they were directed to by the familiar face of Griphook. The tiny goblin was elevated to branch manager after the final battle. Harry was still a bit wary of the goblin, but was relieved as there was another goblin already there waiting for the rest of those who were invited to the will reading to arrive. As Harry, Hermione and Luna sat together on one side of a massive wooden table, they saw that several familiar faces were already there. They were heartily greeted by Neville, Ginny and Pansy Parkinson. Andromeda Tonks was also there with Teddy Lupin. The three were shaking hands and sharing hugs with them. They all talked for a few minutes with Neville and Ginny while Pansy was hovering a few feet away looking down and a bit uncomfortable. Luna, seeing this, quietly went to the former Slytherin and took her hand with a smile, tugging her towards the talkative group. Pansy at first resisted, but after an encouraging look from Neville she allowed Luna to bring her in. After a slight pause Pansy explained her situation, which was all due to an old family agreement between their grandfathers which gave the right of refuge to either family if there were no members left of the either family to provide refuge to their own. Pansy's family was slaughtered right before the final battle, due to their refusal to back Voldemort. After Dumbledore's murder, Draco and Pansy's betrothal was cancelled due to Draco being a fugitive. Several families went into hiding. The Parkinsons were one of them, though it seemed that they were unsuccessful. As Neville tried to continue, he explained that a special brass bell above the room's portrait rang in their home alerted Neville and his grandmother of an attack on the Parkinsons, and with a few flow calls to their friends they had gotten to where the Parkinson too late to help. Ansi was at that time at Hogwarts within the Slytherin dungeons, facing off those who had sided with the Death Eaters. With the help of Daphne Greengrass, Tracy Davis, and Millicent Bulstrode she kept the turned students busy enough for a squad of Aurors to come and arrest, and secure them led by of all people, Draco Malfoy. In truth, if it weren't for Malfoy being accepted by the Death Eater sympathizers they would not have gotten there in time. This did redeem Draco, but since the Parkinson head of house was killed the betrothal wasn't reinstituted, plus Draco simply did not love Pansy now as anything other than a friend. Afterwards, Lady Longbottom got word to Neville, and he and Ginny went down and got Pansy and what belongings she had so they could all go to Longbottom Manor. As Neville finished his explanation another group of people entered. As they sat down Harry caught the glance Andromeda gave him and he acknowledged it by a silently said, "We'll meet after this." As they sat, Draco Malfoy, his mother Narcissa, Daphne Greengrass and Tracy Davis all sat down while Charlie Weasley stood behind Narcissa's seat with a sword on his side and seemingly looking everywhere for any threat. After a moment's thought, Harry remembered that the Order of the Phoenix had assigned Charlie to protect Narcissa after what had taken place during the battle where the Malfoys switched sides during the battle. Their betrayal of Voldemort and the Death Eaters shifted the tide of the battle right before Harry and the former Tom Riddle had their final dance of death. Harry looked, and it seemed that their entire group also seemed to come to the same conclusion. They all nodded to the Malfoys which was returned crisply as they all took their seats. Charlie's only respite came then when Ginny ran around the table and briefly hugged her brother. He smiled, promised to catch up with her later, and then Ginny made her way back to sit on one side of Neville while Pansy sat on his other side. They were to the left of Hermione, Harry, and Luna who was seated right next the goblin who was patiently waiting for the final guest to arrive. Then, in a quick last-minute rush just before the appointed time for the will reading to begin, 3 more entered the large conference room. Quickly seated were Hannah Abbott, Ron Weasley, and a clearly pregnant Susan Bones. Hermione seemed to grow whiter in her complexion, until both her hands were taken by Harry and Luna respectively. That gesture calmed her bit while Ron, and to a lesser degree, Susan and Hannah were also seemingly uncomfortable seeing Harry and the girls there. After a few mumbled greetings the newcomers sat down. Then the sound of 2 heavy doors closing and the clearing of a throat got everyone's attention. The patient goblin who had sat there the whole time awaiting all those called to the will reading spoke. "I am Ripclaw, Headmaster Snape's account manager and I welcome you all to Severus Snape's will reading." The wizards and witches all nodded and he continued. "I see all on my list have come, and with that said I will need those who have attended to sign this oath of secrecy. This is a prerequisite from Mr. Snape and those who cannot adhere to this must leave now." All those who were in the room had very astonished looks on their faces except 2 people. Narcissa was smiling and nodding to her sister who also was doing the same. The others there saw this and Draco quietly asked, "Mother, why are you and Aunt Andy smiling? Do you know more about this oath?" Both women smiled again and simply nodded and said nothing. Both women had reconciled after the final battle, not only for comfort due to Ted and Dora's deaths, but to re-establish the Black family in the revamped British wizarding world. "Seems just like what Professor Snape would do, as there will surely be secrets exposed that he would not want to be made public," Luna said in her willowy voice that she was known for. With that, all seemed to understand and within a few minutes everyone, even a grumpy Ron and Draco signed it as they both were curious of what was to be said, but for totally different reasons. Ron wanted to know a NY thing that could make his view of Snape more real, while Draco wanted to find out what his godfather had schemed so much that even after death it was evident that he was a true Slytherin. When all had signed the parchment, Ripclaw set it beside the actual will, and after clearing his throat again to get everyone's attention, he continued with the ceremony. "I Severus Tobias Snape, being of utterly sound mind, make these statements as my last will and testament irrevocable and final. As Ripclaw said this, the oath parchment then brightened with a golden hue, and then as the hue dissipated each person in the room seemed to have a chill run through them. Most attributed it to the oath, but Narcissa and Andromeda shared a look of slight alarm, but kept quiet as Ripclaw continued. As it is, in my opinion, clearer if I were to tell you all these statements personally, I will in a pensieve. With that a round stone pensieve materialized on the center of the table, and with a touch of Ripclaw's staff, which no one had noticed before, he activated the memory within. It had the appearance of a shallow stone basin, into which were carved runes and strange symbols. It was filled with a silvery substance that appeared to be a cloud-like liquid gas. Harry recognized that that was the memory, as it activated a 3-foot-tall version of the lanky, dark-clothed professor and former headmaster came into view. Everyone recognized the man and waited for him to speak. It is with the utmost loathing that I make these statements, as if I am being heard as a pensive memory. It means that I did know survive the upcoming battle, which I know will be at Hogwarts. He closed his eyes and in a visual sigh he continued. I first must state some facts about my family, the House of Prince, before I can get to the codicils. I state as the last of the Prince line that there is an heir to that line in this room. This statement shocked the room, and as all looked, Narcissa seemed to choke on the spoken words. The pensive Snape seemed to turn and find the Malfoy matriarch and continued his speech. I am sorry, Sissa, but the truth must be brought out, at least in the next generation. The pensive Snape looked truly remorseful but continued. As all have signed the oath, I will say that my heir will have to name their second son as the Prince Heir, thereby reviving and continuing that noble house that died with me. Then the pensive Snape turned towards Draco Malfoy, who was nervous awaiting its next words. Draco Abraxas Malfoy, you are the heir of the House of Prince and will continue that line. As per the oath, this specific information will not be revealed until your second child is born. That child will have the prince name hyphenated as Malfoy Prince. As everyone digested this, Draco slowly turned to his mother and asked, how? Why? Narcissa Black Malfoy turned and faced her offspring, and after a pregnant pause answered. Your father was impotent, and we, as in your grandfather, father Severus and I all agreed that to keep the Malfoy line continuing, as well as a way to guarantee that the Prince line continue, Severus agreed to be the one to impregnate me. I of course had no real say, but I was happy that at least it was Severus, as he was a great friend to me. She took Draco's hands as he seemed stunned and non-responsive except his eyes, which were firmly on his mother. Narcissa continued. So we conceived you and agreed on this, so while if something happened to Severus, his house would continue, and we even made arrangements for this at a non-magical. You mean by Muggle means mother. To say you stooped to using Muggle means to, Draco choked out while Tracy and Daphne huddled closer to his side, providing as much comfort as was allowed as Narcissa continued on. We also blood adopted you while you were just born, so magically and now by blood you are the heir to 2 noble houses. Mrs. Malfoy then turned from her son and sat silently as the room awhite. Whatever came knew they would have words later, but both stood stoic and resolute. Wait, this means that Snape's Draco's dad? A very confused Ron Weasley stated. Yes it is, said the pensive Snape. But this knowledge goes no further than what has been stated. I hope that was clear enough, especially for those of you with limited mental abilities. That got the attention of all there, some grumbling, Harry, Ron, Neville. Some quietly smiling, Pansy, Narcissa, while Draco simmered quietly. The rest sat and waited until the pensive continued. With that taken care of, we will go to the codicils. To Narcissa I leave all of the Prince family properties and any assets from the family to be the regent of until my heir comes to his or her majority. Narcissa nodded while Draco gave her a glare. Andromeda sent a glance of sympathy to her sister. Then the pensive continued. To Draco I leave all my potions, books, notes, and equipment, as I have a side business making potions during my summer months off. He has the right to continue it, or liquidate it as a betrothal gift for when he finds a fiancé. Draco seemed pleased, though he was still visibly upset. To Neville Longbottom, I leave all my raw materials which he can take and use in his leisure, or he has the option to partner with Draco should he decide to continue the potions company I have. I also have to say that after all my treatment of you, Lord Longbottom, you have risen beyond what I would have thought you would do. You have shown by your courage under fire this past year that you have truly grown into your title, I hope that you pursue a career in herbology, as that is your greatest strength. Well, that was about as close an apology as Neville was going to get, so he simply nodded to the pensieve as it moved to the next person. Ginny simply squeezed his hand. To Susan Bones, I give my voluminous notes that cover potions and defense in the dark arts as a debt paid to your aunt. Use them well and keep your fiancé in line as he needs constant guidance. Hopefully with you he will equal his aptitude with his application on this chosen career. Remember, Weasley, you have a future to support. Ronald was as red as his hair until twin slaps behind his head made his quickly calm down. Though, a thin grumbling continued from his frowning mouth. To Andromeda Black Tonks, I'm sure you are surprised by this Ood, I have a life debt to discharge, and this way I do not have to do it directly. I have set aside all the galleons Theodore Tonks Lupin will need for Hogwarts, and also enough for a Muggle university if he elects to pursue that. This satisfies the debt I owe the child's godfather. The pensive then turned to Harry. Finally, to Harry Potter, I have a potion that he will be responsible for to apply the Hogwarts ward stones to effectively nullify the curse that Tom Riddle cast on them when he applied for the Defense Against the Dark Arts position before the First Wizarding War. So you see, Potter, you and I are, as they say, even. And finally, I will say this: I loved Lily Rose Evans with all my heart, but I let my negative views and my hatred for your father cost me my first, best and dearest friend. For that I am truly sorry, in my decisions and their cost to you and me as well. Keep your friends, your true friends, close and never let that closeness go. I can tell you from my experience it will break you if you do not. Harry, knowing in the end what Snape did and now why he did it, rose and bowed to the pensive. The pensive of Severus Snape smartly bowed back. With that I will is reading and say that I hope your futures are bright, but I also hope you will remember this: anyone who forgets history is doomed to repeat its mistakes. I, Severus Tobias Snape, a proud wizard and human being, bid you all adieu. Then the pensive image turned and all saw the billowing cape as Snape's image walked away, fading from view. For a minute no one moved while all seemed to digest what had been said. And what could not be said until quite a few years down the road. Then, with the abruptness he was known for, Draco Malfoy rose, and with Daphne and Tracy on each side he turned first to those opposite on the table and made a simple nod, which they returned. Then he turned to his mother and said clearly enough for all to hear, as head of the Malfoy and apparently Prince family, we will have a family meeting after the wake, mother. Do be prompt. The Malfoy matriarch sighed, then with just as curt a nod followed her son and his friends out the now open door. Charlie waved to his brother and sister and followed. A minute later Ron and his fiancée and her friend also left, leaving Harry, Hermione, Luna, Andromeda and a now fussy Teddy Lupin. As they all left, Ripclaw sent the paperwork on its way to the Ministry and Gringotts Records Department. A silvery glow now encased the oath letter, and then a paper airplane materialized and went off, headed through the bank's ventilation system. It made its way outside and up and over Diagon Alley, headed for a building now housing a reception wake for one Severus Snape. Oh. At a cafe just down the alley from Gringotts, Andromeda talked to the trio, making it clear that she expected Harry to be a large part of Teddy's growing up. Harry for his part enthusiastically agreed, while Hermione and Luna promised to help not only Teddy but Harry as well. All laughed at the look on Harry's face as they had a bit of pastries. Then they made their way to the leaky cauldron and its flow. Harry, Hermione, and Luna went to St. Mungo's, Andromeda and Teddy to Grimmauld Place and Snape's wake. With a quick meeting with Zeno and his expressed happiness at the trio's promise to visit his sensei, he gave Luna a sealed parchment envelope with the Lovegood seal on it. Now Poppet, I need you to give this to Sensei Katsuhito and no other. Can you do that, Pumpkin? Luna simply nodded and took the envelope as they said their goodbyes, then headed to the hospital's flow with the others. And then to the Black family home. The Malfoys flowed directly to Grimmauld Place as the Order had already secured and set up the wake in the main dining room. With the Weasleys as members of the Order, Ron and Neville and their girls went to Grimmauld Place as well. So it was about 1 hour later that Harry with the girls, Andromeda and Teddy flowed in with Harry doing his imitation of a slide into home plate as if he were playing American baseball. After greeting all those who were at the reading and settling in the dining room, they all started to talk about various things. There were a few stories, some good and more bad, about the departed Severus Snape. Most of the enlightening stories came from the Black sisters. Many eyes were opened and some attitudes changed as they shared their view of how after Snape had made such costly personal mistakes he did what was required of him to save their world. Then, after a time, they all made a toast to old departed friends. As they were celebrating, a paper airplane entered unnoticed through a vent and slowly settled underneath the food table before it transfigured and became an odorless, tasteless gas which permeated the home slowly but completely. All who had signed the parchment from the will readings seemed to be hit with a strange sensation, as well as those they had touched, immediately seemed to black out at the same time. They slowly, almost like a group imperious curse, walked up the stairs to specific bedrooms. All the while the order members who were not affected tried spells, even physical means to stop all this. But all those affected seemed to in a world all their own. So with a group of witnesses watching, 5 trios entered separate bedrooms, silencing and locking them behind them. For the next 3 days all that was allowed by those affected was to allow Molly Weasley to enter the rooms, bringing in and taking out meals while those affected were lying in the enlarged beds with zoned-out looks on their faces. On Saturday Madame Pomfrey followed a distraught Molly so she could check each and every person affected. Thanks to her skills with diagnostic spells, they finally read out on Sunday night what had happened to the group. With a few potions masters and mental healers, they concluded that the parchment each person signed gave each of them a benign potion that by itself did nothing. But, when combined with a spell which was done at the reading, then a charm to transfigure the parchment first to a paper airplane, then to an odorless tasteless gas, it all combined to set up the victims. Although the weekend there were Aurors, unspeakables and healers trying to come up with the how and why until a tome which was a part of the Snape will was found with the various sections marked by, of all things, colored tabs. It seemed Snape wanted this to be found. It was Sunday night when Molly and Madame Pomfrey used a simple mist spray bottle to deliver an antidote which would put them all to sleep until the next morning. With that Molly did her rounds of those affected, and at 10:30 that night came upon their room. As the door creaked open, Molly Weasley made her way into the smell within, the musky and charred memory of fires long since past. The Weasley matriarch swished her wand, cleared the smell, it with a clean, crisp aroma. She then looked down at the 3 in the large canopied bed. "Oh my dears, I wish none of you had to go through this," Molly thought as with a few more flicks of her wand their sheets were cleaned and they were magically washed as they slept. Mrs. Weasley then looked at the clock and turned to leave, swishing her wand one last time, leaving a chilled pitcher of water and 3 tall glasses. She reminded herself to check up on them in the morning as she had 4 more rooms to check for other victims. As she left she said a small prayer to whatever gods might be out there for the 3 asleep in the room. As the door clicked shut, Harry unconsciously pulled Hermione and Luna closer as they both sighed contentedly. As Harry Potter slowly awakened from a rather long sleep, at least from his point of view, he saw 2 fuzzy shapes. One, a bushy brown fluffy shape on his right, was familiar to him and he quickly deduced that it was his best friend, Hermione Granger. He smiled and turned to the other, nebulous blondish shape. And he kept his smile as he figured out that it was his other best friend, Luna Lovegood. He decided to look up, expecting a hospital ceiling or more likely Hogwarts infirmary. As many times as he had been in that part of Hogwarts, he knew what that particular ceiling looked like. But, he instead saw the canopy of a bed he was familiar with, at least he had been familiar with it a few years ago. While he looked around some more, Harry remembered where he was, in Sirius Black's master bedroom at number 12 Grimmauld Place in London. Then he realized that last thing he remembered was the wake for Severus Snape had taken place at the Black family townhouse. As he scanned his memories he felt himself being pulled up into a sitting position and the brownish-haired shape handed him a familiar pair of glasses. As he put them on he realized 3 things. He was naked from the waist up as the sheet and bedding slipped down to reveal his torso. He looked right and saw Hermione similarly dressed, or undressed as the view showed. He looked left and found out Luna was dressed the same as he and Hermione. As he contemplated this, the 2 girls kept a constant watch on their male bedmate, both of whom anticipated his reaction. It only took about 8 more seconds for Harry Potter to react. He tried to jump out of bed where both girls literally tackled him down while he started to yell several things from, "Let me go," to, "I'm sorry," to the one that made both of them cringe, "I raped you too, so please let me kill the bastard." It took both girls hugging him firmly and replying to him that he didn't rape them. That it was not his fault, that they cared for him, along with other loving and heartfelt comments for him to finally calm down enough for the girls to get him to promise not to apparate away, hurt himself. Or hurt whoever could have done this to them. It took close to 5 more minutes for the girls to explain that they had woken up a few minutes earlier and had found a note of parchment with several lines of instructions, and that they would all be expected in the ballroom adjacent to the dining room by 9 that morning. After a quick time-checking charm from Luna, they agreed to take turns using the bathroom, with Harry being first. They had about 30 minutes left before the meeting. Right after Luna came out dressed as her companions, Molly Weasley entered their shared room. "Oh good. It's nice to see you three up." She smiled and hugged all three. "Now remember to be downstairs in 10 minutes. We'll be able to tell you what happened while you have your breakfast." She smiled and headed for the door. "Mrs. Weasley, were we the only ones affected?" Hermione asked, seemingly realizing what might be happening. The Weasley matriarch shook her head sadly. "No, several others were also affected. And they are here too, so you will see them soon." She raised her hand in a calming gesture. "You all will be told at breakfast. Now I need to visit the others and get them ready for things as well." She smiled again as a way to tell them she was there to help them. They nodded and thanked her while she responded in kind. Then she left the room. It took them to just before the time was due for them to head down to adjust and come to accept that they would have to find out with everyone else just what was going on. With some apprehension they all sighed together, and with tight smiles they took each other's hands and headed down to Grimmauld Place's first floor. Scene 2. As they arrived downstairs, the trio sat down and waited for the rest who were affected like they were. Soon they saw Molly come down, wave, and then continue to the kitchen to make sure breakfast was being made. They assumed Creature and Winky would be on there, as well as those house elves associated with those who were at the wake. Hermione made the logical assumption that those who were at the wake were similarly affected as they were. Molly Weasley then told them that she was left in charge of them all with other order members and healers from St. Mungo's checking in throughout the weekend. Madame Pomfrey had flowed over throughout the weekend to check on all of them. They asked Mrs. Weasley to thank her and began to talk about what might happen now. As Harry, Hermione and Luna discussed their circumstances, they heard, and then saw the rest come down the stairs. First was the familiar face of Neville Longbottom with Ginny Weasley, and Pansy Parkinson following the scion of House Longbottom. Next, their former enemy, now reluctant ally, Draco Malfoy, with Tracy Davis and Daphne Greengrass following the blonde-headed leader of Malfoy and Prince houses. Following them was Narcissa Black, her sister Andromeda Tonks Black, and a smiling Charlie Weasley. It seemed that the adults were taking this better than the teens were. Finally, Ron came down with Hannah Abbott and Susan Bones Weasley. Ron looked like a doomed man walking that last mile to an execution. Poor Git, Harry thought as Ron shambled to the first of the last 3 seats available at the long table located in the Black Ballroom. As Molly and the assembled elves served breakfast, most of the trios talked amongst themselves. Though the younger sets kept looking at the adult trio as it seemed they didn't seem to have a care in the world. 2 of the males' teens in particular were looking at them with what seemed repressed anger. Ron and Draco's glares would have driven off dragons, if any were there. It took the combined efforts of the both girls of each trio to calm them down. As this was happening, 3 adults entered the ballroom turned dining room. Of the 3, one is Madame Pomfrey. The second was revealed to be a male healer owing to his light green functional robes, and the St. Mungo's crest on the upper right chest. The third was female, with a dark purple robe, with the crest of a potions mistress. As those at the table waited, Madame Pomfrey finally spoke. "I hope you have finished the lovely breakfast courtesy of Molly Weasley and the various house elves. I suggest a kind word from you all to them for their efforts." All nodded as she then continued. "I should also introduce these 2 with me. First to my right is Healer Bagshot, the lead healer of spell damage at St. Mungo's." The tall blonde man simply nodded and kept quiet as Madame Pomfrey continued. "To my left is Potions Mistress Lancelot, who came up with how the cure worked and developed the antidote that was given to you Sunday night." The middle-aged raven and gray-haired woman smiled and also nodded. The now grateful group sitting on the dining room table. Then all three took turns explaining what they had found out during the weekend. How it was Snape who had not only affected those at the will reading, but those magicals roughly aged 15 to about 50, though to a much lesser degree. As the size of Snape's curse came to the front, most of the older and retired healers had to step in. They were the first group that had recovered from it. Then Potion's mistress Lancelot added, "As you all know, all of you have been affected by a complicated yet brilliant magical curse that used a spell, combined with a charmed object, and a potion to affect you all. The main effect of this was to break down your inhibitions, and to focus your attentions and affections on the one, or in your cases the ones who you cared for the most." Most at the table had an idea of what happened, but not how specific a curse Snape had invented. He tailored this for them, but why? Most had that question in their minds as Madame Lancelot continued. "This was done by Potion's master Snape, and as you were waking up the goblins delivered another pensive. We think this will answer why he did this." As she finished, Molly came in while behind her floated the familiar pensive from Friday's will reading. A few of those at the table quickly got up thinking they might get cursed again, until Madame Pomfrey held her hand up and materialized a whistle and blew it. That stopped all where they were. "We checked this and it is not cursed. Remember, the parchment was cursed, not the pensive," she harumphed, and those who had moved away from the table slowly sat back down, most taking the hands of their mates. As they now calmed down, those at the table listened to the three adults, then stood back as Molly taught the pensive to begin Snape's explanation. "As I see all of you are back and here to hear my reasons why I cursed a lot of you." As he surveyed the angry looks he was given, pensive Snape continued, "I did this for the future of the wizarding world in Britain. As we have a lack of male wizards, and as I purposely asked all of you to my will reading, I not only picked those who obviously needed to be there, I also picked those who in my opinion are the future of the British Wizarding Society. I also did it because most of those who died were pure or half-bloods, and the fact is that we need Muggle-borns to save this world. I tailored this not only for you to procreate the next generation of magicals, but to encourage more magicals being born in the non-magical world." Everyone now understood what Snape had done. He knew a world under Voldemort would have been the end of their society, either through deaths within their society or the Muggles wiping them out, as Tom's ambitions would have doomed them all. "I also added in a feature so that most of you will have twins, thereby continuing those houses on the verge of extinction. Of course most of you would continue to procreate, but I wanted a large number in this initial generation to improve the odds for a repopulation of our society sooner rather than later. Given how the non-magicals, or Muggle, will eventually react, we have time left until they discover our magical societies around the world. So you did this to repopulate the magical society and not as a way of revenge?" asked a confused Draco Malfoy. The pensive Snape gave a smirking look at his godson. "I did this to save us. Revenge, bigotry, hatred and apathy have so far pared down this society from more than 200,000 at the beginning of the 20th century to less than 30,000 now. With almost 2/3 witches, so a 2-to-1 ratio means wizards will have to marry 2 witches at least for the next 2 generations for us to get back to our former numbers." As the pensive Snape waited, all at the table were simply speechless as they ingested what the former headmaster and potions master had said. It took only a minute until someone said, "So I might be pregnant?" asked a now frightened Pansy Parkinson as she echoed what all the witches at the table wanted answered. The answer came from Healer Bagshot. "To answer that, we'll need to see you all for a general check-up. I will take the wizards, Madames Pomfrey and Lancelot will take the witches. If you might be pregnant, you will show magical signs now and be confirmed Friday at St. Mungo's." Poppy and Healer Bagshot divide them up and each examined them. They wanted to make sure that all of them were clear of the curse. As Healer Bagshot led the wizards to the sitting room, which was now converted to an examination and waiting room. The males were all clear of the charm and were cleared to go and wait for their respective. Same went for Poppy and the females. EY took the family living room on the other side of the house. After an hour, Madame Pomfrey declares them fit though a bit dehydrated, and all the women and girls were directed to meet her at St. Mungo's that Friday for early pregnancy tests. All did have the initial magical indicators of embryo implantation. That gave off a magical signature of a connection to the mother's magical core to start. The growing process of a magical baby's core. After all were examined, they made appointments for Friday, and those who didn't live at Grimmauld Place flowed back to their respective homes. Discussions among the new trios. Neville, Ginny and Pansy returned after the revelations at Grimmauld Place. They stayed standing rigidly as they took a few moments to digest what they now knew. Suddenly Ginny flew into Neville's arms and sobs erupted from her, while Pansy, still self-conscious, stood away from the couple as she quietly cried as well. She was quite suddenly taken in my two arms into the middle of a familial knot as Neville quietly held the two closest people he knew while he was trying to figure out how to tell his gran of the new developments. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the living room, Augusta was watching admiring as her grandson was comforting her future daughter-in-laws. Well, that was if she had any say on the matter. The Longbottom dame had just arrived from her babysitting Teddy Lupin. She would make Neville squirm a bit, but she had the house elves start on the nursery just in case. Back at Grimmauld Place, thanks to Harry's generosity, Ron with Susan, Hannah and Molly were staying while the barrow is being rebuilt. While Susan wasn't affected by the pregnancy charm, Hannah had to wait and see what happened at St. Mungo's. She still did not really believe in the chance of her being pregnant. Ron was beside himself, knowing he would be not only the father of Susan's baby, but now probably that of Hannah's as well. Molly also was there, thinking of her boys and Ginny. No doubt her little girl had done what the others had, as she had seen enough evidence in their room over the weekend. Still, Molly was happy as Neville would not allow anything to happen to her baby girl or Pansy given his noble ways. No, she was more worried for Ron and Charlie. Ron now probably had two girls he'd have to support, while Charlie was in a web of trouble as he has bedded not only Narcissa Malfoy, but of all people, her sister Andromeda Tonks as well. With one a widow and the other's marriage soon to be annulled, as she figured Narcissa would not stay with Lucius now, Charlie was in a stew of trouble unless Molly could talk to the Black sisters. Charlie was slotted to continue the Pruitt line since Ron would ensure the Weasley line carried on. They didn't have to worry about having to continue the Malfoy line simply because Draco would, while Teddy kept both the Tonks lines and the Lupin lines going. This of course was all contingent on the idea that Lucius divorced Narcissa. Or Harry, as Lord Black gave her an annulment, otherwise Charlie might have to duel Lucius. Throw in the fact that she hadn't heard from George, Percy, Bill or Fleur, and she had plenty to worry over. She went to send several owls out as she had to gather her family together and plan the rest of this weekend to prepare for Friday. She finally flowed Arthur, who was stuck at the ministry since all this started. Charlie, Narcissa, and Andromeda arrived at the Tonks residence, as Narcissa wanted to plan out her discussion with her son first. Charlie sent an owl to his father to inform him of all the developments as the Black sisters checked on Teddy and relieved Augusta Longbottom, who was looking after the baby with the help of her house elf. After Augusta left, the three sat down and discussed their situation. They agreed that if she was pregnant, Narcissa's child would be the prince heir if Draco didn't fulfill his promise to Snape. Andy would carry on the Pruitt heir as Bill did for the Weasleys. They also agreed that both Charlie and Andromeda would accompany Narcissa to her talk with Draco. Draco, Daphne and Tracy arrived at Malfoy Manor. Part of it was being rebuilt as there had been a skirmish during that final week of the Second War. The upper bedrooms, lower kitchen and sitting room had all been damaged by that battle. So the trio headed for the sitting room to wait for Narcissa, and also taking a few minutes to think about their predicament. Both girls were knowledgeable of the pureblood beliefs, as Daphne was a pureblood and Tracy a full-blood. Yet over the last 3 days it definitely hadn't been on their plans to find a proper husband. Yes, both were attracted to Draco, especially after they were rescued in the Slytherin common room by Aurors led by Draco during the final battle. Yes, they wanted to be courted and each wanted to have a marriage contract set up by their families. But first the war and then Severus Snape's plans seemingly had broadsided them all. Still they did like each other, and their activities this past weekend had gone a long ways towards cementing a relationship between the three of them. So, the girls waited quietly while Draco thought to himself. Though Draco had never been known as a subtle schemer, he tended to act first before he thought things through. Even he saw that he had not only an opportunity to continue the Malfoy line but take the Prince line and bring more political power to himself and his family as well. Plus he did like both girls. For one of the first times in his life, he took the time to think things through and realized that since they were each other's best friend, there would probably be fewer conflicts between them if he did marry both. As he was thinking of this, Narcissa, Andromeda, little Teddy, and Charlie Weasley flowed in. All thoughts of Tracy and Daphne went to another compartment of his mind as he got up to greet his mother and her mates. He tried to consider what both his father and his godfather would do while he made an effort to push his anger away. The last to leave Grimmauld Place were Harry, Hermione, and Luna, who flowed to their cottage. Harry walked out the ward towards the pier jutting out to the large pond beside the cottage. The girls quietly followed a step behind. As he came to the end of the pier, he sat down while allowing enough room for each girl to sit on either side of him. With a look, Hermione was on his right, Luna on his left, and they sat for a good 15 minutes in silence as all three contemplated their shared situation. Harry, Una finally asked as Harry turned to her. Are you all right? There was a long sigh from the powerful wizard as both girls each took a hand to convey their caring to him. If you had asked me a week ago it would have been different than now. Then, I had just killed my lifelong tormentor and I was very depressed at how many died due to that wanker. But now, I have this huge anger towards a man who I have hated for most of my life. Yet, I had thought he redeemed himself to me at the end of his life with the memories he gave us, and sacrifices he had made. Now I have to reconcile that with this. And that it had to entangle the two of you made it worse. What do you mean worse? Don't you care for us, Harry cut Hermione off. No, of course not, you two are the people I care for most in the world. What I am furious about is the fact that yet again another adult has manipulated not just me but others to get their way of things. Well then we'll have to be the ones who are in charge of our lives so we can avoid such. Isn't that right? Luna asked lightly in her quiet flighty voice. Both of her companions turned to her and after a few moments of thought nodded their acceptance. Hermione added, you have to remember that we will always be with you, Harry. There are some who will try to take advantage of you, especially those who know more than you do now. With Luna and me, we can give you varying views and more choices. Plus if we are pregnant we are a family and family helps family. Luna added, with that said, it looks like we'll have to delay our trip by at least 1 week. Plus I think we need this extra week to talk and plan out what we want to do. Not just going back to Hogwarts but what are we going to do as in career and where we will live. As Harry was trying to keep up with the girls nodding his head left then right as each girl spoke he was about to speak when Luna said, yes, Harry it's we, and you are not going anywhere without us, got it, or the Aphelims will rot your joints out. Then both girls in turn gave him a searing kiss, got up and walked back to the cottage to fix lunch leaving a flummoxed wizard to think about what was said and try to clear the fog from his addled brain. Boy can those girls kiss. Rattled around his mind. 3 days later, in an interrogation room in Azkaban prison, Lucius Malfoy, the once powerful and arrogant head of the Malfoy family was brought in to see before him a chair in front of a square table. Behind was sitting a familiar figure in a bright pink cardigan. And sadly no, it wasn't the Queen as even she wouldn't wear that shade of pink. He shuddered at the thought. Behind her were 2 others he recognized, Jugson, and to his left Selwyn. Both he knew as Death Eaters who had gotten away from the final battle and were in hiding. Though right at this moment they were behind Dolores Umbridge whom he thought was also either dead or on the run. Before he could think any more, Umbridge spoke. Hem. She smiled that smile. Lord Malfoy, I am glad you are still lucid and in good standing here. Well, given that the Dementors are no more it is a less gloomy existence here. What do you want from me, madam? Lucius answered, waiting for more. Well, let's get to it then. I would like you to sign over your guardianship of one Draco Malfoy to me. You see, I am going to all heads of house that have heirs and children under the age of majority. As an incident has occurred this past weekend that has facilitated a large change in the status of all children from 15 to 18 years of age. Umbridge seemed like she had swallowed a gob of ice cream. And what, pray tell, was that incident? The former head of Malfoy asked. Well, your son as well as many others succumbed to the Snape curse which made Hos from 15 to 55 act like rutting centaurs, and as there will be an issue of blood status as well and parental rights we want to see how this can be used to further the pureblood agenda. I'm sure you would be supportive of this as we already have your son and prospective brides set to be married before the progeny appear, so to speak. He knew Umbridge was power-hungry and had no scruples, yet he thought this plan of hers was doomed to failure. He wanted no part of it. And why would I sign my rights not only as his father but as head of House Malfoy to you and whomever is also on this plot of yours? He answered. Why, you say? Well, there are 2 reasons. First, you want to get out of this filthy place, and second, you want your current wife to renounce your house and marry of all beings a Weasley. What a sight. Seeing Umbridge turn almost purple in a pink cardigan outfit. Lucius of course knew of everything that had happened and had agreed with Narcissa, who had visited I before to allow Draco to assume head of house and marry his 2 brides while Lucius stayed in prison for a 5-year sentence. He was to finish his sentence, and while he would no longer be the head of Malfoy House, he would be a key advisor to Draco, as well as Daphne and Tracy, as their families had been killed off as well. Having a say in 4 houses was tempting enough to patiently sit through 5 years. If nothing else, no one could say that Lucius Malfoy was not a patient wizard. Now, while he wasn't happy with the arrangement Narcissa had made with Charlie Weasley and her sister Andromeda, there was little he could realistically do about it. But considering the fact that he didn't love Narcissa anymore and could have affairs as he saw fit since he was no longer the head of the Malfoy house. Still, a Weasley. I think not, madam. Now please. I need to go back to my cell and contemplate a book on what I have known about the wizarding world. You might want to read it, as it will be very explanatory. He smiled and turned to leave. He fell on the next step as a killing curse hit him square on his back. Jugson, use his hand and use the signing copy charm so we can be out of here. The former Death Eater did that, then applied the glamour which he and Selwyn wore into the prison. Since the Dementors left, it was taking time to set up new procedures and safeguards at the prison. Anti-glamour charms had not been scheduled to be applied until Friday, so he and Selwyn got in without a problem. What do we say about him? Selwyn pointed to Lucius's body on the floor. Say he tried to strangle me, and you two as my witnesses saw that I had no choice but to use the killing curse. She then stood and walked to the other side of the table just in front of the body. Selwyn, give me that cursed knife. Dolores then stood above Malfoy's body and threw the knife into the table in the right angle to show it had come from the direction Lucius was laying. Self-defense, the Muggles call it. Yes, that will do, Dolores commented. As they left, they forgot another tool the new Aurors department will take from the non-magical law enforcement: fingerprinting. Even a glamour charm doesn't hide fingerprints. Next. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out author of this story. Details in description.